Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sarel van Grinnen, aka Mr. VG, and I am stoked. New word for the day. I'm stoked to be here, and today's is going to be a weird day. Today I'm going to look at questions that were asked that's just a bit out of the ordinary, but questions that we as examiners really like to ask. Now, for those learners that are struggling with 30 and 40% maybe, I'm asking you just keep up with me. But for those of you that are looking at your 70s, 80s and 90s, these kind of questions should be your bread and butter. So what we are going to have a look at is two questions that was posed by various schools in previous exams. Now the first one asked this. Given f of x is equal to 5x squared plus 4x, determine 2 times fx minus f of x minus 2 for 3 marks. Now some of you, when you see this, you already go, whoa, sir, next question. But let's actually see what they do. So what I like to do is I like to break up the question into its two separate parts. So I'm going to look at 2fx and f of x minus 2. Let's have a look at what that actually means. So if I start by looking at 2 times by fx, it means take the whole function and multiply it by 2, because there's a 2 now in front of it. So in other words, that's going to become 10x squared plus 8x. I'm going to stop there and go, let's go on to the next little bit of information. Let's look at that f of x minus 2. What does that mean? Now, f of x minus 2 means that I've got to replace every x in my formula, in the original formula, with x minus 2. So in other words, 5 times x minus 2 squared plus 4 times x minus 2. Because everywhere where there's an x, I've got to place x minus 2. Graphically, it would mean fx shifted 2 degrees right. I like to always tell my students, if it's x minus 2, it's opposite of logic. So in other words, my mind says minus should be negative, but with x values, it's going to be in the positive direction. So plus 2. If it is f of x plus 1, logic or intuition would say 1 to the right. But because it's with x values, it will be 1 to the left. But I'm not going to look at the graphic interpretation thereof now. I'm just going to look at f of x minus 2. And let's multiply out. So I'm going to square out those brackets. Remember, if you are a bit rusty on your algebra, remember x minus 2 squared means x minus 2 times by x minus 2. Which means I'm sitting with this expression. And now I can add the like terms to form 5x squared minus 16x plus 12. Now that is f of x minus 2. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to combine it into one sentence, into one expression, and by looking at those two expressions from the top. So 2 times by fx is 10x squared minus or plus 8x, and then I'm going to subtract f of x minus 2 from it. And this leads me, by multiplying the negative in, to a final expression of 5x squared plus 24x minus 12. Now that doesn't really mean much. But what the examiner was actually trying to look at is, do you understand function notation? So let me not keep you too long. Let's look at the next question. So, ladies and gentlemen, looking at our second example for today, we are going to specifically have a look at a bit of a weird question. This specific question has to do with exponential graphs. Now, exponential graphs are a bit notorious for being able to be asked in weird ways. This specific one is asking you to sketch the graph of h of x equal to a times b to the power of negative x plus q. If it is given that h of x is an increasing function, that b is between 0 and 1, and that q is greater than 0. Now that is, I'm being very honest with you, a bit of a weird question. So what I'm going to have a look at is, how am I supposed to answer this question? Well, first of all, it's increasing. So we know the graph must be going upwards. Now, secondly, we've got to look at the b value. In other words, the base. You know, it's all about the base. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. When we specifically look at the base, if they tell me b is between 0 and 1, my humble opinion to you is choose a value for b. For example, make b to be a half. Well, if we make b a half in the function, then I don't want to sit with a negative x. So I'm going to make it positive. Now to make it positive, I reciprocate the half. In other words, it becomes 2 over 1, or just 2 to the power of positive x plus q. Now this means that the actual base of a power of a positive x, because that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to work with a negative x. That base is larger than 1, which means that the graph goes away from the asymptote. It diverges, which means, taking it further, that I actually have only two options. The one option is that the function will lie above, or it would be below the asymptote. So if it is above the asymptote, going away from it, my graph will look like that. Or it could be below the asymptote and diverges. That's just a beautiful English word, going away from the asymptote. But now I've got to remember, what did they tell me about the function? They told me the function is increasing. In other words, it cannot be decreasing, and therefore our second option is out of the window. So now we've got to look lastly at that q value. That's actually the easiest one of them all. The q value being greater than 0 is an asymptote. In other words, my asymptote lies above the x-axis, and there I've drawn it in. In other words, last little bit, my graph will lie above that, going away from, or diverging. So the graph will look like that. Now I know this is a lot of explanation for a 3-mark question, but this is me talking through why, how, and where it happens. In the exam, it will take you 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes to read through this and run through this in your head. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a fun video for me because it challenged us to think past where we usually are comfortable with. This is Sarel van Grinnen, aka Mr. VG. Please look out for the last video in this series that's going to be specifically about parabolas and how parabolas can be asked in the exam coming up. Have a beautiful, wonderful rest of your day. Keep well. Cheers.